before killing another person sitting in a car just blocks away.
What makes a teenager pull the trigger without a second thought? In the dim streets of Milwaukee, a mother's walk home turned into a nightmare when 16-year-old Michael Thomas decided her life was worth a purse. One shot, one laugh, and a city was left haunted. He thought his age would protect him, that he'd walk free. But when the courtroom fell silent and the gavel struck, his calm turned to chaos. This isn't justice, it's a descent into darkness. The night a walk turned to murder. August 22nd, 2011. It was a Monday evening in Milwaukee's northwest side. Humid, still, the kind of quiet that makes people lower their voices without knowing why. Sharon Staples, 29, walked hand in hand with her 13-year-old son after visiting relatives. She was tired but happy, talking about catching the next bus and what they'd eat for dinner. Her son remembers her laugh that night, how normal everything felt. Within minutes, that laughter would vanish beneath the sound of a single gunshot. Two teenagers, Michael Thomas and Malik Merchant, both 16, were prowling the neighborhood, looking for an easy target. Thomas carried a cheap handgun tucked into his waistband. Merchant acted as lookout. They weren't hardened criminals, just kids steeped in the rhythm of petty theft and quick money. The streets had taught them that courage meant control, that pulling a weapon made you somebody. But that illusion would shatter the instant Sharon refused to hand over her purse. The shot cracked through the evening. Sharon staggered, a red bloom spreading across her chest, and collapsed onto the sidewalk. Her son screamed, running for help as Thomas and Merchant sprinted toward a waiting van. The echo of that gunfire hung in the air like smoke, twisting upward into the Milwaukee night. When police arrived minutes later, neighbors lined the block in shock. Sharon lay motionless. Paramedics fought to revive her. She was 10 to 12 weeks pregnant. Both she and her unborn child were gone before reaching the hospital. Her son's description was vivid. Two teens, one with cold eyes and a crooked grin. Detectives followed the trail fast. Surveillance footage, shell casings, and witnesses who'd seen the van circling earlier that night. Within days, Milwaukee police had names: Thomas, Merchant. The teen who thought he was untouchable. Michael Thomas wasn't new to police attention. By 16, his name was already scribbled across juvenile case files for theft, assault, and armed robbery. He'd grown up in Milwaukee's rough pockets, surrounded by drugs, gunfire, and the daily echo of sirens. For him, violence wasn't shocking. It was background noise. The line between survival and sin had blurred so long ago that he could no longer tell one from the other. But what made Michael different wasn't just his record. It was his confidence. People who knew him said he carried himself like someone older. Teachers remembered the dead stare in his eyes, the kind of look that never waited for permission. Even as a boy, he'd learned that the system didn't scare him. Juvenile detention centers had revolving doors. He'd serve his time, get out, and walk the same streets again. He once bragged to a friend, "They can't touch me. I'm a kid." That belief would become his downfall. When detectives arrested him for Sharon Staples' murder, he didn't cry, didn't beg. He sat in the interrogation chair like he'd been there 100 times before, shoulders back, lips pressed into that same expressionless calm. Officers later said he spoke in short, detached sentences, never denying, never explaining, just accepting, as if this were another mistake that would soon fade away. When police pieced the story together, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. Thomas and his accomplices had planned the robbery hours earlier. They needed quick cash, nothing more. The van, the gun, the lookout, it all pointed to premeditation. When Thomas pulled the trigger, it wasn't fear, it was impatience. And in that split second, he became something else entirely. A killer. The city buzzed with anger. Newspapers ran the headline, "Teen shoots pregnant mother in front of son." Talk shows debated what was wrong with Milwaukee's youth. Politicians promised reforms, but for Thomas, behind bars awaiting trial, none of that mattered. He believed his age would save him. 16, after all, wasn't old enough to face life in prison, or so he thought. He spent the first weeks in juvenile custody, acting unbothered, playing cards, joking with guards, bragging that he'd be home by 25. When his attorney visited, he smirked. "They can't keep me forever." The woman they couldn't save. Sharon Staples was more than a name in a case file. She was a mother of 7, a sister, a friend, and the quiet strength that held her family together. At 29, she carried the weight of motherhood with grace, working long hours, cooking for her children, and still finding the time to laugh. To those who knew her, she was the kind of woman who made hardship look easy. But on August 22, 2011, her ordinary kindness crossed paths with a boy who saw none of it. She'd spent that day with her family, just another outing in Milwaukee's warm summer air. Her 13-year-old son, the second oldest, walked beside her, teasing her about how slowly she walked when she was tired. She told him to hush, laughing, holding his hand as they made their way toward the bus stop. It was the kind of small, fleeting moment every mother treasures. A simple walk home after a good day. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. When the two teens stepped from the shadows, Sharon didn't see a weapon first. She saw 2 boys, barely older than her own children. She didn't even think to be afraid. When Michael Thomas demanded her purse, her first instinct was to protect her son. She told him no, her voice steady but firm. That defiance sealed her fate. The bullet tore through her chest before her mind could even process the sound. Her son screamed her name, but her knees buckled and she collapsed onto the pavement. In the chaos, her purse fell to the ground and the strap tangled around her hand. Thomas ran. Merchant followed. The van screeched away into the distance, leaving behind a child kneeling beside his dying mother. Neighbors rushed out at the sound of the shot. Someone called 911. Someone else knelt beside the boy, trying to pull him away, but he wouldn't let go. "She's still breathing," he cried. But by the time paramedics arrived, Sharon was fading fast. She was 10 to 12 weeks pregnant. The baby never had a chance. That detail broke the city's heart. A mother and her unborn child. 2 lives stolen for nothing. The media called it the senseless murder that silenced Milwaukee. For weeks, strangers left flowers by the sidewalk where she fell. Handwritten notes, candles, even children's drawings crowded the spot. A shrine to a woman who never saw the danger coming. The arrest that shook Milwaukee. The manhunt for Michael Thomas didn't take long. Within days of Sharon Staples' murder, Milwaukee police had gathered enough threads to weave a noose around the teenage killer. Witness statements, shell casings, and one terrified lookout. What stunned investigators wasn't just how fast they found him, but how unconcerned he seemed when they did. The arrest went down quietly on Milwaukee's north side. Detectives surrounded a small duplex where Thomas was staying with friends, his arrogance intact. He just stared at the officers, shrugged, and raised his hands as if it were an inconvenience. "Y'all took long enough?" he said. It was that cold indifference, the lack of fear, the almost smug defiance that made even hardened detectives uneasy. Inside the interrogation room, Thomas sat back in his chair, unfazed. He didn't ask for a lawyer immediately. He didn't cry. Instead, he spoke in flat, emotionless sentences. "Yeah, I was there," he admitted. "She didn't give me the purse. I shot." Meanwhile, on the streets, the community reeled. Milwaukee had seen its share of violence, but this case was different. The victim wasn't a rival gang member or a stranger in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a pregnant mother, gunned down in front of her child. That detail turned fear into fury. At a press conference, the police chief called it a turning point in how we address youth crime. Behind him stood a board filled with mugshots of teens arrested that year, Michael's face front and center. He didn't look angry or scared, just bored. Days later, co-defendant Malik Merchant was arrested. His confession sealed Thomas's fate. Merchant admitted they'd planned a robbery, but claimed he never thought Thomas would actually shoot. The van's driver, who cooperated with the police, confessed to everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. The calm before the verdict.
Going to be done by this courtroom being disrupted, okay?
In the months leading up to trial, Michael Thomas sat in detention, waiting for a bus, not judgment. He ate, slept, joked with guards, and carried himself with an eerie calm that unsettled everyone who saw him. Most teenage defendants broke down. Some cried, others panicked, but not Michael. He acted as though prison were a minor inconvenience, a pause before life went back to normal. What no one realized was that beneath that composure, arrogance was building into something darker. His defense attorney clung to one hope: his age. 16. That number became their shield. They painted him as a boy lost in the system, neglected by his parents, shaped by poverty and violence. The courtroom filings were filled with phrases like underdeveloped brain, lack of guidance, and capacity for change. To the defense, Michael wasn't evil. He was a victim of circumstance.
You're going to make the situation worse. Now listen, and I will explain to you guys.
But prosecutors weren't buying it. They'd seen the body cam footage, the crime scene photos, and the transcript of his confession. They knew what kind of calm they were dealing with. This wasn't confusion. It was coldness. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Williams described him as a child without conscience, one who believes youth erases consequence. Her goal was simple: make sure it didn't. When the hearings began, the tension in the courtroom was suffocating. On one side sat Sharon Staples' family, their faces carved with grief. On the other hand, Michael's relatives, his mother in tears, his older brother glaring at the prosecutors. The courtroom air buzzed with unspoken hatred. Michael walked in wearing an oversized suit, shackled at the wrists, expression blank. He didn't glance at the Potters. He didn't even look at the judge. He sat down, leaned back, and stared into the distance like none of it mattered. Journalists whispered as cameras clicked. This wasn't the behavior of a scared kid. It was defiance in its purest form. Even the judge noticed. "Mr. Thomas," he said during one hearing, "you appear remarkably unbothered by what's happening." Michael shrugged. "I'm listening," he replied, monotone. But his composure began to crack when prosecutors presented the footage. Neighbors testified. The van driver pointed at him in court. Merchant took the stand, describing how Michael pulled the trigger without hesitation. The jury watched, silent, as the 911 call from Sharon's son played. His screams filled the courtroom. Even hardened deputies shifted uncomfortably. Through it all, Michael barely moved. No tears, no expression, just a blank stare, as if the horror unfolding around him was someone else's story. But those who knew how to look closer saw it. The faint tremor in his fingers, the way he bit his cheek when the child's voice echoed, again. His calm wasn't a strength. It was collapsing, waiting for the right moment. The mother's last witness.
Right? We're going to do that, and as long as you are calm and cooperative, we will then, once I know that...
When the court opened for sentencing, the air felt heavier than usual. Charged, brittle, on the edge of breaking. This was the day Sharon Staples' family would finally speak. For months, They had watched the boy who killed her sit calmly, smirking, whispering to his attorney like it was a school discipline hearing instead of a homicide trial. Now, with the eyes of Milwaukee fixed on them, they were determined to shatter that calm. First came Sharon's mother. Her trembling hands clutched a folded sheet of paper, edges damp from tears. Her voice broke on the first line. "You took my baby," she said, staring straight at Michael Thomas. "You took her and the one she was carrying." The courtroom went silent except for her breath. Michael didn't move. He sat rigid, eyes forward, expression unreadable. Then came Sharon's 13-year-old son, the boy who had watched his mother die. His voice was small but steady, echoing through the chamber. "The main thing I'll never forget," he said, "is the laugh he did after he shot my mom."
What happened here? Why was he done like that?
Because he attempted to get out of his seat.
That line hit like a hammer. Reporters scribbled it down instantly. Even the court clerk paused mid-note. A laugh. That detail hadn't appeared in any police report. But now, said under oath, it painted the murder in a new, monstrous light. It meant Michael hadn't just pulled the trigger. He'd enjoyed it. Judge David Borowski sat back, eyes fixed on the teenager at the defense table. Prosecutors exchanged looks. The audience murmured before the judge slammed his gavel. "Order," he said, though his own voice trembled slightly. Sharon's family spoke one by one. Her sister talked about sleepless nights. Her cousin spoke of rage. Her oldest daughter described the emptiness at home, the sound of silence where laughter used to live. Each word felt like a blow, each tear a wound no sentence could heal.
But now we're done talking about that. We're done talking about that.
When it was finally Michael's turn to speak, everyone held their breath. He stood slowly, shackles rattling. His voice was quiet, rehearsed, almost robotic. "I accept full responsibility for my actions," he said. "I apologize for the pain I caused your family." He looked up at the judge. "Please don't take my life from me." The apology fell flat, lifeless. It wasn't remorse. It was survival instinct. Sharon's family didn't look at him. They'd already seen his truest self in that laugh their son could never unhear. When the gavel fell,
Anything that you want done further than that, you can call and I will explain it to you. But right now,
June 29th, 2012. The Milwaukee County courtroom was packed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with tension and expectation. Reporters filled the back rows. The victim's family sat together in silence, and deputies lined the walls, ready for whatever might erupt when Judge David Borowski delivered his sentence. At the defense table, Michael Thomas sat still, staring at nothing, hands folded neatly on the table like a student waiting for a teacher's grade. But this wasn't school. This was the end. The judge cleared his throat, eyes locked on the 16-year-old before him. "Mr. Thomas," he began, "what happened that night was nothing short of senseless, brutal, and inhuman." The courtroom hung on every word. Michael didn't blink.
as soon as we can get everybody out, and it's going to be orderly.
The judge continued, voice low but firm. "You took a mother from her children, and you took an unborn life. You have an awful juvenile record, one that shows a pattern of disregard for law and life, and I fear what kind of man you would become if ever released too soon." The silence deepened. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner broke through. Then, slowly, the judge said the words that sealed everything. "For the homicide of Sharon Staples and her unborn child, I sentence you to 35 years in prison, followed by 10 years of extended supervision, the maximum allowed under this plea." It was over. For a heartbeat, the room stayed frozen. Then, like a thunderclap, it shattered. "No!" Michael screamed, slamming his fists against the table as deputies rushed forward. "No, you can't do this to me!" He tried to lunge toward the bench, fury twisting his face. The same boy who once sat calm and unbothered was now pure chaos, shouting, kicking, thrashing. The crowd erupted into noise. Sharon's family clutched one another. His mother wailed. deputies restrained him, wrestling him to the ground as his screams echoed off the walls. One officer shouted for pepper spray. Another pinned his legs. His voice cracked, half anger, half panic. "I said I'm sorry! I said I'm sorry!" As deputies dragged Michael from the courtroom, his family broke down. His mother collapsed into sobs, screaming his name. His older brother, overcome with rage, cursed the judge and lunged toward the railing. Instantly, deputies restrained him too. "You'll regret this," he yelled, struggling as officers hauled him away. It took 18 deputies to restore order. The Potters sat frozen, stunned by the eruption of violence. The judge's face was pale but steady as he spoke over the mayhem. "This courtroom will be cleared immediately." The courtroom that wouldn't stop screaming. What happened after the sentence didn't feel like justice. It felt like chaos unleashed. Deputies flooded the courtroom, their radios crackling as they tried to separate two collapsing families. On one side, Sharon Staples' relatives held each other tightly, crying so hard their words barely formed. On the other hand, Michael Thomas's family descended into panic. His mother shouted, "That's my baby!" over and over, her voice shaking as officers pushed her back. His older brother, still handcuffed, screamed curses at the ceiling. The sound was raw, human, unbearable.
Everybody's cooperating? All right.
The judge's voice cut through the madness, calm but sharp. "Nothing good will come from this," he warned. "This will only make the situation worse." But emotion had taken over. Logic no longer lived in that room. Years of pain, denial, and fear were colliding all at once. Deputies cleared the Potter family first. They were escorted out quietly, clutching tissues, faces streaked with tears. Sharon's mother had to be helped to her feet. As she passed the defendant's family, she whispered something no microphone caught, something meant only for a mother who'd raised a killer. Judge Borowski stayed seated long after the room had emptied. He later admitted he'd never seen anything quite like it. "You expect emotion," he said quietly, "but you don't expect it to feel like grief on both sides." When the doors finally closed, the sound of their cries still echoed through the empty courtroom. For a long moment, it felt like the building itself was holding its breath, wondering if justice had really been served, or if this was just another tragedy dressed in order. The sentence that outlived his youth. Once the courtroom quieted and the chaos faded into distant echoes, the reality of Michael Thomas's new life began to take shape. The words 35 years didn't hit him all at once. They lingered like smoke in the air, familiar, unreal, slowly seeping into every corner of his mind. He had entered court as a 16-year-old who believed his age made him untouchable. Now he was a convicted murderer staring down middle age before freedom would ever greet him again. They processed him through Dodge Correctional Institution, Wisconsin's gateway to the state's prison system. The intake officer read his name in a flat voice, clipped his wristband, and guided him through the motions. Fingerprints, mugshot, medical check, issue of gray uniform. Somewhere behind those walls, the last traces of boyhood drained away. The guards saw hundreds like him every year. Faces too young, eyes too old. At first, he carried the same defiance he'd shown in court. He bragged to other inmates about how big his case was, how his face had been on every Milwaukee newscast. But notoriety fades quickly in prison. No one cared about his headlines. They cared about respect, and Michael had none. He was just another kid who'd killed the wrong person and had years of silence to pay for it. In letters to his mother, he tried to sound strong. "I'm good, Ma," he wrote once. "Don't cry. I'll be out before I'm 50. But the ink told another story. Heavy strokes, shaky lines, pages that smelled faintly of disinfectant and despair. His mother wrote back every month, her faith unwavering even when she knew the truth. The boy she once raised was gone. Prisoners who saw him in later years described a man quieter, withdrawn, staring at the walls during roll call. He used to talk a lot, one inmate said. Now he just stares. The smirk was gone. The calm was gone. What remained was a hollow reflection of what arrogance once built and time had destroyed. The echo that never faded.
I need you all to stay together. Follow my officer's directions. We're going to escort you.
The name Michael Thomas still lingers in Milwaukee like a shadow you can't quite step out of. Not because people remember his face, but because they remember what he took. A mother, an unborn child, and the illusion that youth can excuse evil. His crime was quick, his punishment long, but the echo of that single gunshot never really stopped. It still ripples through the streets where Sharon Staples once walked, through the hearts of those who saw her story unfold. Sharon's 13-year-old son grew up fast after that night. Reporters once asked him what he remembered most. He didn't talk about the sound of the gun or the sight of blood. He talked about the laugh. He laughed when he did it, he said quietly. That detail became infamous. It followed Michael more than the bullet ever could. The sound of his laugh became the symbol of Milwaukee's anger, the sound of a generation gone cold.
I ask you to follow my officer's directions. We're going to ask you to leave. Any issues you have past that, let's let cooler heads prevail.
Sharon's family turned their grief into purpose. Every August, they gather at the corner of 35th and Capitol, where she took her last breath. They light candles, play her favorite songs, and release balloons for the baby who never got a name. The vigil isn't about vengeance anymore. It's about remembrance. Her oldest daughter said it best. She was more than what happened to her. She was loved. She was home. Meanwhile, Michael Thomas's name occasionally resurfaces in true crime documentaries. His courtroom outburst replayed for viewers who never saw the pain behind it. The clips rack up millions of views. The calm face, the gavel drop, the explosion of chaos. People comment things like, "He deserved it," or "What went wrong with kids like him?" Few realize that every replay reopens a wound for the family still living with the consequences. Now 29, Michael remains in Dodge Correctional Institution. Time has stripped him of the arrogance that once defined him. The smirk is gone, replaced by the blank stare of a man who has outlived his own noise. He speaks little, avoids interviews, and spends most days in silence. The prison staff says he reads a lot now: religion, psychology, crime novels. Perhaps he's searching for understanding, or perhaps he's just passing the time. For Milwaukee, his story became a turning point, a catalyst in the push against teen violence, a reminder that monsters aren't born overnight. They're built, one bad choice at a time, until remorse is nothing but an afterthought. Judges began citing his case in sentencing hearings and lawmakers in debates. His name turned into a warning.